welcome to Alopecia's Audacity podcast, proudly hosted by the Canadian Alopecia Areata Foundation. I'm Sarah Teskey.
And I'm Christal Malcolm.
I'm Lauren Harrison, and we are here to offer you a breath of fresh air from those without hair.
We're here to challenge the audacity of alopecia to think that it can hold us back from living our best life. We're here to empower and cultivate an open discussion on all things hair loss and how to navigate it with confidence, not only on your own, but with others.
You can find CANAF on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at CANAF. That is CANAAF. And learn more about our organization at canaf.org. On our homepage, you can subscribe to receive our monthly e-newsletters, and we'll send you updates on our latest episodes, as well as other alopecia news and event updates.
On behalf of Canadians who have been diagnosed with alopecia areata, CANAF supports those who are affected by this disease, promotes awareness and education, and raises funds for research.
For our first episode, it feels right that the three of us should share our personal stories with alopecia so you can learn more about us and what brought us here to you in this podcast. Every story is different, but we hope that there are pieces of our journeys that can help you listeners out there feel connected and inspired. So let's get into it, ladies. Lauren, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. So I would say that my experience has been a total learning curve. I started losing my hair when I was 3 years old, and when it was diagnosed by a family doctor and then a dermatologist, it was identified as alopecia areata. And through my adolescence, I didn't really know anyone who also had an autoimmune disease and who was losing their hair in such a cyclical way. So I did feel very alone. And when I was 13, my family and I found CANAF, and I went to my first support group, and just to see others who were experiencing hair loss and who were familiar with how unpredictable this disease was really comforting to me. When I was in high school and I lost all my hair when I transitioned from alopecia areata to universalis, it was a pretty rapid loss and it really freaked me out. So I did start wearing a wig. I felt like that was the way that I could continue to show up at school and in my extracurriculars and not have too many questions. But I did feel really uncomfortable. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, do you think that was just because like high school is such a different experience than like elementary school? Is that kind of where did you feel like that extra pressure from maybe students around you or your friends?
Yeah, I think not really knowing any other bald females that were my age or that really owned and embraced their difference, I didn't feel like I could be the one to stand out in my high school. And I had also spent so many years in denial that I think I turned to sort of overcorrecting as a form of coping and feeling like I had to compensate for the loss of my hair by being high achieving or doing things to make up for what I was lacking. And so it took a lot of energy to sort of push myself to my limits. And I think if I was also being vulnerable and exposing this very visible difference, I didn't feel at that point ready to do it. On a brighter note, it's taken time, but I've reached a point and still kind of working towards the point where I can embrace this difference about me and sort of telescoping out to see that with some perspective, it really isn't as big of a deal as I thought it was. I think if you spend a lot of time in your head, you start to overanalyze and kind of over-intellectualize things, and it's really not healthy. At least it wasn't healthy for me to be so self-deprecating and so consumed by my own thoughts. So all that to say, I've been trying to sort of replace that analysis and self-deprecation with a little bit of levity and some kindness. So you almost just have to laugh at yourself. I personally will laugh at myself when I think, wow, I just kind of hurt my own feelings by doing that, because there are enough people in this world that you might run into that'll tear you down. So you don't want to be one of those people yourself.
Very true. Very true.
I felt that. Ooh, girl.
I hope that vulnerability is helpful. Speaking openly about how we really feel and how much we struggle inside our own heads sometimes can just maybe resonate with others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thanks
You're
for
an absolute inspiration.
Thank you, Sarah. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. So my journey with alopecia started when I was 6 years old. my mom found a bald patch on my head and she had no idea what it was. She actually thought it was ringworm because she'd never heard of alopecia areata before. But my pediatrician told us that it was alopecia areata. And so we got referred to a dermatologist where I started treatments. And for a number of years, those treatments actually worked. You know, I'd have a patch of hair missing, I'd use a topical treatment and it would grow back. And then another patch would fall out. So it was kind of this cyclical kind of experience with my alopecia at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was 10 years old, I lost every hair on my body within a few weeks.
Wow.
So I developed alopecia universalis, and
Okay.
that was one of the most scary times of my life. I had no idea what to do or why this was happening to me, and neither did my parents. We had way more questions than we had answers and didn't know where to turn for these answers. I just remember feeling really scared and alone because I didn't know anyone else who was going through what I was going through. My friends, my classmates, no one could relate to me. And so that's when my mom reached out and found CANAF, and we started going to CANAF events. And I got to meet other people who were like me, other kids who had also lost all their hair. And that was a really, really big comfort for me at that time. It allowed me to listen to others' experiences and just know that I wasn't alone. And sometimes that can make all the difference when you're really struggling inside.
Totally.
And so the way that I like to cope was I wore a wig for many years. I was a very, very shy child, and I didn't want to feel different from everyone else. So my way of coping was wearing a wig and just continuing to do the things that I love to do. For me, that was sports. At the time when I lost my hair, I was a competitive dancer. I was also a competitive figure skater. I played volleyball, I played soccer, I did gymnastics, like almost any sport, you name it, I love to do. And I just wanted to continue doing them just like every other child. And like for dancing, one of the biggest things that we had to do for competitions was do a really intricate hairstyle, like an updo, a bun, something like that. So I went through some really tough times struggling to fit in, to feel like myself. There were times when I didn't want to go on stage for a dance competition because I was so scared of my wig flying off. Or there were times when I broke down and cried and said, "Mom, I don't want to do this anymore." But somehow with the support of my family and my friends, I just continued doing it. You know, it was the same with like going to friends' birthday parties and going swimming. Like sometimes I would avoid those because I just didn't want to feel different, or I didn't want people to realize I was wearing a wig. So in grade 11, when I was, about 6 or 7 years later, is when I started to regrow some hair. To this day, I still don't have a full head of hair. I'd have like sparse hair on my head. I have a little bit of body hair, but that was one of the biggest moments in my life. I remember going to my mom and being like, "Mom, look, I have finger hair." And I was just so excited because I had this like tiny little finger hair sticking up, and it was just a sign of maybe change and maybe regrowth for me. There was a point where I just decided that I didn't want to wear a wig anymore because of all that I'd gone through, because of how much shame I'd built up inside and embarrassment surrounding my alopecia. It came to the point where I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I was tired, and I saw people around me who were embracing being bald and being themselves, and I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be free. This all happened one year when I was at a CANAF conference. I met a few people who just truly inspired me to be myself. It was always a safe space for me being at the conference because people didn't see me differently, didn't treat me differently. And that was always one of my biggest fears. So really just having that support from the community is what allowed me to transition into not wearing a wig eventually. It was quite a time in my life where I just felt myself growing more empowered and more authentic in myself. And it was a necessary part of my journey. And I think it took me emotionally maturing into an adult for me to realize that I was able to do it and that I wanted to do it. It took quite a bit of time. It took just even going out to Shoppers Drug Mart without a wig at first.
Yeah.
Walk
me through you going to Shoppers Drug Mart right now.
Yeah. From the moment I decided to do it, I honestly chickened out a couple times. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I was like, no, maybe not today. I just had to have a lot of grace with myself and let myself go at my own time. So the first time I wanted to go out, didn't happen. And I was like, okay, I'll try again tomorrow. I'm not feeling it today. That's okay. And the next day, I was able to talk myself up to it, to get in the car and drive over to Shoppers. And the whole entire car ride, I just remember thoughts reeling through my mind. Like I could feel my heart starting to race as I got closer. And I just had to keep telling myself positive things like, it's okay. You know, I'm beautiful just the way I am. No one's even going to care. Everyone's there doing their own shopping. I'm just going to go in. It's going to be a quick 5-minute, go in, grab whatever I need and leave. And I just had to keep setting that perspective for me in order to get there and do it. And I remember my heart racing so much when I was in the store. I was looking around every corner to see like if people were looking at me or, what other people's reactions were going to be, just constantly searching for that. And honestly, it was completely fine. A few people looked at me and that was okay. That's to be expected, right?
Right.
And getting back in the car afterwards felt like one of the most free feelings I've ever felt in my life. I felt just happy and proud of myself for putting myself out there.
Love it.
And at that point, it almost became like, you know what, I want to do this again kind of feeling because it felt that empowering.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how I kind of took it in steps and eventually transitioned to just being comfortable without a wig.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's basically my journey in a nutshell. So where I am today is just being accepting of who I am. I don't feel the need to ever wear a wig again in my life unless if I want to. And I love having my power back in that way. Before it was like, I need to wear a wig because if I don't wear a wig, I'm not going to feel like myself. For now, it's the opposite. It's not a necessity for me anymore. And that feels really, really empowering.
Yeah, just to be able to add that zest, but like you say, to totally own who you are and be empowered in embracing exactly who you are. That's really cool, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I'm glad I'm in this space now.
We're glad you're here too.
We are.
Yeah. So, Christal,
yes, ma'am.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, where do I start? So for me, my journey started probably in my late teens. So I'm really bad with numbers. So I'm going to say like around 17-ish, and then transitioning into my early 20s is when I started to notice that my hair was thinning. My hairdresser actually noticed it as well. Like I was aware, but I was in a state of denial. But when I went to the hair salon, she was like, I'm noticing a little bit of thinning on the top crown of your head, and I think you should probably look into it. She'd recommended some shampoos and that sort of thing, but also suggested I go see my family doctor. But for me, like when I was in my 20s, I kind of just fluffed it off. Like I knew there was an issue, but I wasn't taking it super seriously. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I used to wear, and I still do, like I would wear what we call protective styles. So I would wear wigs, I would wear hair extensions or weaves, braids, that sort of thing. So I always had a style that was able to kind of disguise what was going on, even though I knew the truth. And then it just came a point where it was like, okay, I can't really hide this anymore, but I was still in a state of denial. So, same thing, going to my GP, being referred to a dermatologist. And I want to say the dermatologist appointment wasn't very pleasant, if I can be completely frank. I found it to be very dismissive. I was in there for about not even 15 minutes, and the person looked at me, or the physician looked at me and said, yeah, you're like the fourth or fifth person I've seen with this today. But I didn't know what that was. Like there wasn't really an explanation as to what was going on with my scalp. And I was prescribed shampoo and some kind of like serum, which was supposed to, I guess, help with the inflammation. And just to give you guys kind of like a little backstory of what my scalp's condition was like, my scalp was burning. It was burning. It was itching. I had these, I kind of associate them with like paper cuts, because that's the only way I can kind of describe them. And you don't know you have a paper cut until like maybe something acidic touches your hand or something. Do you know what I mean? Like lemon or whatever.
Right.
And I had those all over my scalp, and nobody knew what it was, but the itching and burning is what I can remember the most. And then I had like a cluster, I call them pimple-like creatures, in the back of my head. So kind of like at the nape, and they were just inflamed. And the itching and the burning and the sensation was something that was so unbearable. I was always in tears. And the thing is, I would go to work with a smile on. Yeah. So, I would perform well, and nobody knew what was going on because, I still did my makeup. I still dressed well. So everything was great according to everybody else. But I would literally be in the washroom and scratching my head to the point like it would start to bleed. Like I would take my wig off or a scarf, whatever I was wearing, and just literally scratch my head because I was in so much pain. So, fast forward, the dermatologist didn't really help that much. So I did a lot of research on my own. And that's where I started doing like more, like researching more natural things that I can maybe put on my scalp. And like, cause I honestly didn't know. So I was just trying everything and anything under the sun. And I didn't find a lot of relief in those things. So I eventually found 2 physicians. This is like years later, because I actually gave up even seeing doctors. So I suffered, I don't want to say in silence, but yeah, I suffered in silence for years. And it was only several years ago that I found 2 physicians that were actually willing to help me. And I finally got a scalp biopsy. And that's when I discovered that I have what's called CCCA. And it's a bit of a tongue twister. It's centrifugal cicatricial alopecia. So it's a form of scarring alopecia. So what that means is basically scar tissue develops over the hair follicle, and then it results in permanent hair loss. And some of the symptoms associated with CCCA is exactly what I was experiencing, like the burning, the itching, and also too, the way my hair loss started, it started at the top in the crown area and then kind of spread out. So kind of like if you have like pizza dough and you're rolling it and you just spread it wider and wider and wider, it was kind of like that. Oh, wow. So yeah, it really sucked and it was very painful. I did have family support. Like my mom was fantastic, but she just didn't know what to do. Do you know what I mean? Like as much as you have this family support, it's kind of you walking through this on your own, even though you have that support. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of how I felt. In terms of like my coping strategies, they were not healthy at all. I will be the first one to put myself on blast and just basically say, I was eating so unhealthy. I was doing a lot of self-deprecating, like you had mentioned, Lauren. I thought I was very ugly. I was constantly stressed. My hormones, all my levels were completely out of whack. I was depressed. I was very angry. I was very sad. But in front of everybody else, you would always see me smiling. Do you know what I mean? And I remember I would even hide food. Like it became that extreme that I would resort to like a lot of fast food, like drive-throughs, cakes, pastries, anything that was sweet that would kind of provide me comfort. But even as I was eating it, like the tears would flow, like I would just be so upset because I know that this is not helping either. So that caused weight gain and, just a lot of unhealthy things. So I eventually did get the clusters, the pimple-like creatures taken care of through medication. And once we had the scalp biopsy, we were able to start kind of like a treatment plan for me. So we helped to get the inflammation down, which was great. But it took a very long time to get there. And I'm now 44. So this is like 20 something years of me not having answers, not knowing what's going on, wondering why my scalp is just so angry. And that's making me angry, So there came up, and mind you, while I'm still going through all of this, I'm still wearing wigs, I'm still wearing head wraps and that sort of thing. And I learned to make my own wigs as well, just kind of because I stopped going to the hairdresser and I kind of just didn't want people seeing my scalp. So I just started doing things on my own. And I don't know, like, I feel like I just had an aha moment one day and I was like, okay, this is just ridiculous now. Like, I really need to take some sort of power back. I need to feel like Christal again because I was so lost. And I was like, there has to be a support group out there. There has to be someone else that looks like me. And and even before all of this, like, I was actually searching, but I just, maybe I wasn't putting in the right keywords in the search engine. I don't know, but nothing ever came up for me. And I remember just being in my room one day and I was like, I need to find a support group because I need to talk to somebody. I need to find someone that looks like me. And CanAF came up. And I was like, what the heck is CanAF? And then I'm like scrolling and I'm like, oh, they have support groups. So I took that step and I didn't even give it a second thought. I just signed up. And I remember when I attended the Zoom, and this is something I've never, ever done before. Nobody's ever seen me without a wig or a scarf except my mom and like my closest friend. And I showed up at the support group with nothing on my scalp because I felt like this, for me, I need to do this for myself. I need to be in a space where I can feel comfortable showing up like this, where I don't feel like I'm using my scarf or my wig as a security blanket, because that's what they were to me. I mean, I used to wear them just because I loved wearing them, but now it became an absolute necessity. Like, it was a security blanket. Like, I would not leave home without it. It's like an American Express. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't. And can I tell you, when I attended that group, it was probably one of the most incredible feelings ever. I just felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. And shout out to Anna Laura, because she really just made me feel so comfortable. And the fact that she also wore glasses, because I'm obsessed with glasses, I just felt like I could relate. And even the conversations that we had, I was very talkative and chatty in the group. And I was very surprised at that because I was so like, I don't want to talk. I don't know what this support group's going to be like. You know what I mean? Like, but I was very talkative. And I think it was just a way for me to just release all of these emotions and anxiety that I was feeling. And it was literally a breath of fresh air. And I am so grateful for that support group, because that led me to wanting to be a part of CanAF, because I was like, I need to be a part of this. I need to feel like I belong. And that's when I actually applied and I ended up becoming a board member. Yay. And I feel like losing my hair was probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because when I lost my hair, that's when I found who I truly was. And so I have absolutely no regrets that it's taken me over 20 years to get to this place, because I've experienced every single emotion that you could possibly imagine. So I can now relate to other people, and I can empathize, and I can show compassion and understanding, and I can be that beacon of light and help to be an example, you know, and be a pillar of our community like the two of you, and just show people that despite everything that you're going through, there's a light at the end of the tunnel in all of this. You know what I mean? And if I didn't lose my hair, I would have never met the two of you. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I just, without getting all kaflemt and crying and teary-eyed right now, it's just honestly, it's just been an absolute blessing. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. And, you know, I hope that, you know, this podcast and what we're doing in this space really and truly inspires people to embrace what they're going through and know that there are people there to help them, and that there are people there that get it. And it's not just hair. It's so much more than that, you know?
Wow. That made me very emotional, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
You've been through so much. I can't believe you went through like 20 years without really knowing what you were going through or having a name for it. That's yeah, that's really, really difficult. But I think what you said about having hair loss, going through this, has made you who you are today. That really resonates, because you're right. Like, it's a journey that shapes you. And I love
Absolutely.
how you turn that into a positive thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes I wish that, I reflect and I wish that maybe I didn't take so long to get to this place, but I feel like everything happens for a reason and everything has its season. And for some reason, it just took me this long, and that's okay. And that's where you give yourself grace. And that's where you, like Lauryn, like you said, you don't compare yourself to other people, because everyone's walk is so different. And that's how we create diversity within this community, by having different journeys and walks and experiences. Do you know what I mean? So I don't regret anything. Nothing.
Because if everyone went through the exact same experience, then no one would learn anything from each other, right?
Exactly.
It's our differences that really, in ways, bring us together and make us stronger.
They're strong. What is it? What's the saying? There's more power in numbers or something like that.
Strength in numbers.
Strength in numbers. Yes.
Stronger together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a question for you, actually, Christal.
Shoot.
Is there any support options for people with CCCA? Like, is there anything like CANAF or any charities or organizations?
So there are, from what I can remember, there is an organization. I believe they've changed their name, and I think they're called Scarring Alopecia. And I think there's an organization that is called CCCA or something. Don't quote me. I'll leave the information somewhere if I can find it.
In the show notes.
Yes, in the show notes, we will find some information for you. But when I initially was looking, there wasn't anything. And to be honest, there is little to no research on CCCA in general. So when I had my biopsy and we finally had a name for it, when I was Googling, the same handful of articles would come up. So because it's so rare, it's not as common as, say, universalis or areata. There isn't a lot of attention given to it, if that makes sense. So that was a little bit frustrating. And that's why I was a little bit hesitant to go to CANAF, because yes, they focus on areata, but I realized that they embrace all forms of alopecia.
Absolutely.
So that was also refreshing, because I just felt like there wasn't a lot of information out there for the type of alopecia that I had. But there are two, I believe, organizations out there that are available, and I will definitely leave that in the show notes. But yeah, leave it to me to have a rare form of alopecia. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. It was an absolute pleasure. Stay tuned. More to come for Alopecia's Audacity, because alopecia definitely has its own audacity.
You said it. Thanks so much, everyone. And catch you next time.